I fitted a $700,000 body kit to the wrecked Bugatti Chiron. And a lot of you didn't like it. And I get it. The design is wild. It's never been done before.
Matt Armstrong thought the hardest part of rebuilding his Bugatti was finally over. The car was almost ready. The problems were disappearing. And after everything he'd been through, it looked like the nightmare was coming to an end. But then something was found inside the Bugatti. At first, it looked like nothing important, until Matt realized what he was actually looking at. Because this one discovery could explain everything that had gone wrong with the car, and it may completely change what happens to Matt Armstrong's Bugatti next. And what happened when they looked deeper inside was something nobody expected to find. The discovery begins. For Matt Armstrong, this was supposed to be the moment when everything finally started going in the right direction. After months of problems, unexpected setbacks, expensive parts, and moments when it seemed almost impossible to bring the Bugatti back to life, the finish line finally appeared to be close. Every part of the car had a story. Every repair had created another challenge. And every time Matt thought the worst was behind him, something else seemed to go wrong. But this time was different. Or at least, that was what everyone thought. Because while checking one final area of the Bugatti, something strange caught their attention. It wasn't a major part. It wasn't something anyone had been searching for. And at first, nobody understood why it was there. Matt moved closer. The team began looking at it carefully. And suddenly the atmosphere changed. Because if what they were seeing was connected to the Bugatti's past, then this wasn't just another small problem. This could be the discovery that finally revealed what had really happened to this car before Matt ever got his hands on it. And once they started investigating, there was no turning back. A car with a complicated past. This Bugatti was never supposed to have an easy story. Before Matt Armstrong even began rebuilding it, the car had already been through an incredible amount. Damage, missing parts, complicated engineering, and problems that most mechanics would never want to deal with were all part of the challenge. And that is what made this rebuild different from almost every other project. This wasn't simply a damaged supercar that needed a few new parts. This was a Bugatti, a machine built with some of the most complicated engineering in the automotive world. Every component matters. Every system is connected. And one small problem can lead to something much bigger. That was why the discovery inside the car immediately became so interesting. The more closely they examined the area, the more questions began appearing. Why was it there? Who had put it there? And more importantly, how long had it been hidden? Matt had already spent countless hours working on the car. He knew the project better than almost anyone. But suddenly, there was something inside the Bugatti that didn't seem to fit the story. Something had been missed. And now, after everything the team had already been through, they were about to discover whether this small clue could change their entire understanding of the car. The moment everything changed. At this point, Matt could have ignored it. He could have continued with the rebuild. After all, when you're dealing with a project as complicated, strange things can happen. Old parts can remain in unexpected places. Previous repairs can leave behind evidence. Something unusual does not always mean something important. But this felt different. The discovery raised too many questions. And Matt is not the kind of person who simply walks away when something doesn't make sense. The closer they looked, the more obvious it became that whatever they had found had a connection to something bigger. Suddenly, previous problems started coming back into their minds. The unusual issues, the unexpected setbacks, the parts that didn't seem to behave the way they should. Could they all somehow be connected? Nobody could say for certain. But the possibility was enough to stop everything. And that was the moment the entire project changed direction. Instead of preparing for the next stage of the rebuild, the team now had another mystery to solve. They needed to find out exactly what they were looking at. Because if the discovery was connected to the car's previous damage or repair history, it could reveal something Matt had never known. And what they found next only made the mystery even bigger. Looking deeper into Bugatti, once the investigation began, there was no quick answer. The team had to look deeper. Panels had to be checked. Components had to be examined. And the area around the discovery had to be investigated carefully. This was no longer about curiosity. It was about understanding the car. With a machine like a Bugatti, one small detail can tell an enormous story. A mark can reveal that something was removed before. A missing piece can suggest that somebody had worked in that area. An unexpected component can completely change the understanding of what happened during a previous repair. And as the investigation continued, one thing became increasingly clear. The Bugatti was still holding secrets. Matt already brought the car through an unbelievable journey. He had fought problems that seemed impossible. He had found solutions where other people might have given up. But now, at the moment when the project appeared to be approaching its biggest milestone, the car had presented him with another challenge. And this one was different, because this time, the question wasn't simply how to fix something. The question was what had happened. Could this explain the problems? This was where the discovery became truly important. Matt and the team began thinking back to everything that had happened during the rebuild. There had been moments when problems appeared without warning. There had been times when one solution led to another question. And there had been situations where the car simply refused to behave as expected. That is a reality of rebuilding an extremely complicated, damaged car. But what if some of those problems were not separate? What if they were connected? The discovery inside the Bugatti created a possibility that nobody could ignore. Maybe there had been something hidden in the car's history all along. Maybe the previous damage was more complicated than anyone originally believed. Or perhaps someone had attempted a repair before the car reached Matt and left behind evidence that nobody had noticed. Any one of these possibilities could change the story. And for Matt, that meant one thing. The rebuild was not finished yet. Matt refuses to give up. This is exactly what makes projects like this so difficult. From the outside, people see the finished car. They see the beautiful bodywork. They hear the incredible engine. They watch the first drive. But they don't always see the hours of confusion behind the scenes. They don't see the moments when nothing makes sense. They don't see the frustration of fixing one problem only to discover another one. And Matt Armstrong knows that better than most people. Throughout this rebuild, every major step has required patience. There have been moments when walking away would have been easier. There have been moments when replacing the entire car would have made more sense than continuing. But that is not what makes a rebuild story exciting. The real story is finding a way forward. So when this new discovery appeared, Matt did what he always does. He investigated. He questioned everything. And he refused to accept an easy answer. Because somewhere inside this Bugatti could be the clue that connected the entire story. The bigger question. But then another question appeared. What if the discovery was more important than they first thought? What if it wasn't simply evidence of an old repair? What if it revealed something about the car that could affect what happened next? Suddenly, the stakes became much higher. A Bugatti is not a normal car. A mistake with an ordinary vehicle can be expensive. A mistake with a hypercar can become a completely different situation. Parts can cost incredible amounts of money. Specialists may be required. And a single issue can create weeks or even months of extra work. That was why nobody wanted to make assumptions. They needed answers. And until they understood exactly what had been found, the mystery would remain. The investigation reaches its most important point. The deeper they went, the more attention every detail received. Nothing could be ignored. Everything had to be checked. This was now one of those moments where a tiny detail could become the most important part of the entire rebuild. And that is what makes this discovery so fascinating. For months, the story had been about bringing the Bugatti back. The goal was clear. Repair it, rebuild it, make it work again. But suddenly, the story was about discovering something from the past. Something that had been sitting inside the car while the entire rebuild was taking place. Something that had been there all along. And somehow, nobody had realized how important it could be. Until now. What happens next? Matt Armstrong now faces another major question. Does this discovery create another problem? Or does it finally provide an answer? That is what makes this moment so important. Sometimes the biggest breakthrough in a project comes from something nobody was even looking for. And sometimes the smallest discovery can completely change the direction of everything. This Bugatti has already survived an incredible journey. It has been damaged, taken apart, rebuilt, questioned, and pushed through challenges that many people believed would be impossible to overcome. But perhaps the biggest surprise was waiting inside the car itself. And now Matt has found it. The real question is whether this discovery will finally bring all the answers together, or whether it's just opened the door to an even bigger mystery, the final twist. After everything Matt Armstrong has been through with this Bugatti, nobody expected the next major surprise to come from inside the car. But that is exactly what happened. And now, this discovery has changed the story. The rebuild may be closer to completion than ever before. The biggest problems may finally be behind them, but one unexpected discovery has reminded everyone of something important. You can rebuild a car. You can replace damaged parts. You can repair what is broken. But until you know the complete history of a car, you may never know every secret it is hiding. And Matt Armstrong may have just found one of the biggest secrets yet. The question now is, what else is this Bugatti hiding? And more importantly, will what Matt Armstrong found inside the car finally explain everything, or will it create a problem nobody saw coming? Because with this Bugatti, one thing has become very clear. Just when you think the story is over, something happens that changes everything. But before Matt could move forward with the Bugatti, there was one thing he needed to know. What exactly was hiding inside the car? The discovery had started as something small, something that could easily have been ignored. But the longer Matt and the team looked at it, the more difficult it became to believe that it was there by accident. Something about it simply didn't belong, and that created a frightening possibility. What if somebody had been inside this area of the Bugatti before? What if the car's history was far more complicated than anyone knew? Suddenly, the rebuild was no longer just about repairing a damaged hypercar. It had become an investigation. Matt began looking back at everything that had happened since the Bugatti first arrived. Every strange problem, every unexpected delay, every moment when the car had behaved differently from what they expected. At the time, these problems had seemed completely separate. But now, Matt began wondering whether they had all been connected. And then the team discovered something else. This time, there was no question. Someone had been here before. The evidence suggested that this part of the Bugatti had been opened, examined, or possibly worked on long before Matt began his rebuild. And if that was true, one enormous question remained. Why had nobody mentioned it? The team stopped working. They checked the area again. Then they compared what they were seeing with the rest of the car. And suddenly, the situation became even more confusing because the discovery appeared to tell a story. A story about what might have happened to this Bugatti before Matt Armstrong ever bought it. And the deeper they investigated, the more uncomfortable the questions became. Was this evidence of an old repair? Was somebody trying to fix a hidden problem? Or had someone discovered something before Matt and simply left it behind? Nobody knew. But one thing was certain. The Bugatti had not revealed its final secret. Matt starts connecting the dots. This was when the entire project started to feel different. Matt had spent months dealing with problems that seemed almost impossible. But he is used to problems. A broken component can be repaired. A damaged panel can be replaced. A missing part can eventually be found. But a mystery is different, because you don't know where to start. And as Matt looked back at the rebuild, certain moments suddenly became much more interesting. There were parts of the car that had caused unexpected problems. There were systems that had required more work than originally expected. And there were moments when the history of the Bugatti simply didn't seem completely clear. Could this new discovery finally explain some of those questions? The possibility was becoming impossible to ignore. Matt and the team began checking everything around the area. They wanted to know whether the discovery was connected to the car's previous condition. And then another detail appeared. A detail that made them stop and look again. This was no longer something that could be dismissed as a random object. The evidence suggested that whatever had happened here had been deliberate. Someone had made a decision. Someone had worked in this area. And someone had left something behind. But the biggest surprise was still coming. Because when Matt finally understood what the discovery could mean, the entire rebuild suddenly looked very different. The discovery changes everything. For a moment, imagine being in Matt's position. You have spent months rebuilding one of the most complicated cars in the world. You have invested enormous amounts of time. You have solved problem after problem. You are finally beginning to see the finish line. Then suddenly, you discover something that makes you question the entire journey. That was the situation Matt now faced. The Bugatti was almost ready. But the closer they looked at the discovery, the harder it became to simply continue as if nothing had happened. They needed answers. And those answers could change what happened next. Because if this hidden evidence was connected to an earlier repair, there could be other areas of the car that needed to be checked. And that meant another possibility. What if there were more secrets still hidden inside the Bugatti? That question changed everything. Matt now had a choice. Ignore the discovery and continue toward the finish line, or take the risk of opening up another part of the car and potentially discovering an even bigger problem. For most people, that decision would be easy. After months of work, they would want the project finished. But Matt Armstrong has never built his reputation by taking the easy option. And what happened next proved exactly that. He decided to keep looking, even though nobody knew what they might find. The final warning. But there was one major problem. Every new discovery creates another risk. The deeper Matt went, the more complicated the situation could become. This Bugatti had already tested him in ways few projects ever could. And now, at the moment when the rebuild should have been entering its final chapter, another mystery had appeared. The team continued checking the car, slowly, carefully, looking for anything unusual, anything that didn't belong, anything that could explain what they had found. And as the investigation continued, one terrifying possibility remained in everyone's mind. What if this was only the first clue? What if the thing Matt had discovered inside his Bugatti wasn't the end of the mystery, but the beginning of a much bigger one? Because somewhere inside this incredible machine, there may still be a secret that nobody has discovered. And Matt Armstrong is about to find out just how deep this story really goes.